In this episode, I wanted to talk about the difference between visiting a coffee shop in the United States versus visiting a coffee shop in Latin America. Because honestly, it's a night and day experience. And maybe you've had a similar thing happen to you where you're in Canada or the USA, you pull up in a new city, and it's really hard to find a decent coffee shop where you can go open your laptop and hang out and work at for a couple of hours. You'll be in a major US city and there's no coffee shop for like 12 square blocks. And then the one you finally find is slam packed, it's too loud, it's too busy to hang out in, it's too impersonal, and it's basically like a coffee to go service or something. Or it's too focused on the aesthetics and then the seats are terrible or something like that. It's not made to actually hang out in. So, for a number of different reasons, I find that coffee shops in the USA are very inviting to staying for a number of hours and getting some work done. So, in that sense, they're not very digital nomad friendly. A coffee shop in the USA is simply not digital nomad friendly compared to a coffee shop in Latin America. So, what's the experience like in Latin America? Well, wherever you go, whether it's Mexico or Colombia or Peru, there's going to be a coffee shop on almost every corner with good Wi Fi, good food, cozy aesthetic vibes, not in a cold way, not in a super Instagram way, more like a familial aesthetic vibe. And they're usually going to have really good service too, where they'll come to your table. You don't order at the front desk or whatever. They come to your table, they take your order, they give you a water, they give you orange juice, whatever you want, right? And it's just so much better of an experience. And yes, they have coffee shops like this in Canada and the US where it's quiet, there's good Wi-Fi, you can get a table, good food, it's not too loud. There's table service, and yeah, they exist a little bit, but it's few and far between. Like, it's really hard to find. I'll be in a major city in Canada, the USA, and you'll be in a 4 million person city or something, and there might only be four of those coffee shops in the whole city. It doesn't even make sense. And none of them are walking distance from where you're staying. There's none anywhere close. And then you're like, do I want to Uber to this coffee shop? Is that even worth it? Uber in the US is like $30. So I got to pay $30 to get to the stupid coffee shop to buy a $3 coffee and then $30 back. It's like the whole thing is just really not a friendly experience for digital nomads. So this is part of a wider theme of how Latin America is just much more plug and play for digital nomads, expats, and travelers, whereas the USA and Canada is just not plug and play. It's not traveler friendly in a lot of ways. And in this video, we're specifically highlighting the experience when you go to a coffee shop. And in that sense, when I'm in Canada, the USA, I don't know where to work because, like the co-workings aren't as friendly either. The coffee shops are few and far between. I guess you could go to a library, but even then they're kind of like, do you have the library card? And sometimes it's hard to log into the Wi-Fi. So I always just notice that when I'm in Canada, the USA, I have so much more difficult of a time finding a decent place to work for a couple hours and finding what's quote unquote called the third space. The third space was a term I think that came up around when Starbucks came out. And I know maybe some people listening to this video might say, well, no, USA invented Starbucks. Starbucks invented the third place. And Starbucks invented this idea of Wi-Fi and hang out for a couple hours. And yes, I agree with that to some extent. That, Starbucks certainly helped make the USA more cafe friendly than it used to be. But in 2024, going to Starbucks is not a good experience. I mean, half the Starbucks now, they purposely took the tables out because there were too many homeless people and there were too many crazy people. And if you go to a Starbucks in a downtown in any major US city these days, whether it's Denver or Boston or whatever, there's going to be a homeless guy, there's going to be a crazy guy. It's not going to be a good experience. Half the time there's no tables, as I mentioned. They took them out to sort of prevent the homeless people. And overall, Starbucks is a bit more of a basically like a to-go factory, and people ordering their coffee to go. You will still occasionally see, like, I don't know, like groups of girls giggling and some of the old school normal stuff, but it's few and far between. It's not like how it used to be at all. Whereas when you're in Mexico, you're in Colombia, the cafe is really still, it's what I'm looking for in a cafe, right? It's quiet. There's not too many patrons because there's one in every corner, so none of them are like completely slammed and too busy to hang out in. It's it's quiet. There's great service. They leave me alone. Good Wi-Fi. Quiet enough that I could literally even take a phone call, and private enough because they don't really understand what I'm saying in Latin America because I'll be speaking English on the call and they speak Spanish, which is kind of funny. But overall, it's just so much easier to find a good cafe in Latin America, and it's one of the things I love about it. And of course, almost every country in Latin America grows cafe as well, so the coffee is going to be better. So whether you're in Mexico, Nicaragua, El Salvador, Panama, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Colombia, Peru, Bolivia, wherever. I mean, all these places have incredible local coffee and therefore incredible local coffee shops. Whereas, obviously, somewhere like a Tim Hortons in Canada is just such a third world experience in comparison to what we're talking about local coffee, quiet, civilized coffee shop. So it's sort of another indication of how the third world is becoming more first world and the first world is becoming more third world, exemplified in the cafe culture.